I keep trying, but... Good evening and welcome to the September 15th meeting of the General Plan Advisory Committee. Let the record reflect that all members are present and the meeting is called to order, and we will begin with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And if you would all stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. This is the time set aside in the meeting for announcements from members of the GPAC. Are there any announcements? Yeah.
As I was driving in, I noticed that Grandma's Yogurt has a lovely sign up on her fence that it's a home game this week for the Morro Bay High School football team. And it just occurred to me, that's kind of what small towns are all about. So suggest anybody watching go out and cheer on our local football team at the high school Friday night.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Commissioner Teff, I got something to add.
Sure.
Wanted to let everybody know that we don't have a meeting after hours tonight, so
Great.
we can go a little bit longer. If you're all willing, would like you to do that. If we can't maybe get through the key issue and policies, or as far as we can get through it. So maybe go till 7 if you're all game. If some of you can't or what have you, that's fine too.
I have about 20 people showing up at my house at 6:30.
Well, that probably wouldn't be good for you though.
Oh, just bring them down. Have them come down.
I can't stay past 6 either. I rechecked the agenda today, and so
that's fair. I didn't find out until about an hour and a half ago that there was that availability. We weren't going to have a Park and Recs Commission meeting.
If there are no other announcements, this is a time set aside for public comment. So any members of the public who would like to speak to the commission, come forward. We'd love to hear from you. Give us your name.
Name is Barbara Dorr, resident of Morro Bay. And we did go to the football game last Friday night. They won, and it was absolutely outstanding. But I actually thought the game this Friday was at Slow High, playing Morro Bay. So I saw the same sign. I thought maybe that was wrong. So check your schedule. We have a 10-year-old grandson that lives with us, has since he's been born. So we spend a lot of time utilizing recreational facilities in the community and surrounding communities. Just a little background. We're originally bought here in '93, came up on weekends, vacations, lived in Redondo Beach. I was mayor there for 8 years, on the city council for 4, served on a committee like yours there, served for the LA County, and served as staff to a committee in Orange County, harbors, beaches, and parks. And when I was in office, we did have our very ancient general plan totally redone. I believe the committee was probably 25 members, and has probably been redone since. But just so I understand what you're doing, I appreciate it deeply, and it's just sort of normal when people don't come out until they find out what's happening. That's when they're really interested. Basically, I sent you emails, and so I just have some things to summarize instead of that. High priority is reasonable development standards, enough to keep mansions on appropriately sized lots, not on small lots, so we don't have the 1,000 Ridgeway problem. I think if you increased rear yard setbacks, that would help tremendously. Provide space between. So many balconies go out and extend into the privacy of the neighbor. Power plant site. Been coming up on that one for a long time. It's critical. If you owned that many acres and your business left, you would call it an emergency. You would get out, you would hustle for a new tenant, new somebody. You wouldn't let it sit there and further deteriorate and not inform your investors, meaning the taxpayers, what's going on at that site. Right now, it's a blight, and it should be eliminated, and they should have to meet code also, because they're pretty messy over there. And the big issue what I've been active outdoor recreation, table 11.5 is, I think, outrageously in error. Needs to be redone, acreages recalculated, short-term vacation rentals, protect our R1 single-family neighborhoods. We moved there to have neighbors and people around us, not short-term party renters, even if they're wonderful. They could be allowed in mixed-use commercial areas where there may be homes or multi-use, multi-family, but prohibit them in the R1s, please. Build new hotels and motels in the Embarcadero, not on the water side. Try to build them on the inland, on the eastern side, like the proposal that was somewhere out there at Centennial Park into the Bluff. I don't know where that's gone, but that seems a more appropriate place to have a larger serving hotel as an anchor in the Embarcadero. And I think that area at Centennial Park, the city's talked about it for years. As long as I've been coming to council meetings, you have to have a good connection between the downtown and the Embarcadero, and that's critical. And please make it a high priority on your list, along with the power plant. By renovating the power plant, you get economic development, and you get jobs, you get new tax revenues in your city, and you don't have the ugly blight. Commercial fishing, that's what makes us so unique, is the commercial fishing in our harbor. Do everything to protect it. I've seen the battles in the past, I guess Measure D or whatever it is, and non-commercial fishing developments are intruding into the commercial fishing area. It's so unique. It's so special for this community and all those people that visit. I worked with people in Orange County. This is where they came. They got their fish, their crab. They loved it. Oh, as an aside, because it's improved technology, it would be nice to have internet available right here in this council chambers so that while we're watching a meeting, we could have access to your agenda, not have to print it out and spend, use all our ink. So that would be really nice to see that kind of technology included. Now I can't go without table 11.5. And I just drove back after I dropped my mom at the hairdresser. I went by Anchor, and that's where we would park every time we paid for the storage or the side tie for our kayak. It's called, not Anchor, Mariner Memorial Park. That's shown as 1 acre. I mean, that is, 100 feet by 25? To call that a park is outrageous. You need to take acreage off that immediately. I'll go back to the A's. Anchor Memorial Park is shown as 2 acres. Outrageous. That's not 2 acres. Have somebody draw the map and show you where the city calculates that 2 acres. Centennial Park, if you compare that to Monte Young, 1 acre, it's just not 1 acre. We were just out there playing the chess. It's not 1 acre. Maybe if you count the restrooms and the parking around, which is for the harbor. City Park, it's got a basketball court. It's nice, but there are problems with homeless and transients, and it's not the most comfortable park to bring your children to, though people do. Cloisters, absolutely beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful park, and thank you, Coastal Commission, for giving us that park. Coleman Park, 9 acres. Del Mar Park is 9 acres. There is no way a little linear strip with the continuation of a boardwalk and a bike path is 9 acres. And I think, based on what my nephew, when he went to Cal Poly, says, he was involved as a student in designing that almost non-park. We do go there to use a basketball court. Lila Kaiser, it's not ours. 10 acres, it's not ours, it belongs to Dynegy. If they have some plant, they need to extend the grid, it's gone and it's not ours anymore. Mariner, I already mentioned. Monty Young Park, we went down there with our grandson playing tennis now. Glad to see it wasn't double lined for pickleball, so there's actually a nice tennis court for adults, past coaches that were there, and from soccer and little kids. Tidelands Park, we've always used that. It's for younger children. It's beautiful. It brings about imagination, but it still needs to have improvements where the tower, some of the things are still missing, and that was grant funded. And then Bonnie Johnson Bike Park, I'm glad to see it was named after her. She's the one who worked. The city really didn't put much of anything in that, but support, as I understand it, except for supporting her. That's 4 acres, and that belongs, I understand, to PG&E. It's nice that they let us use it, but I have sent you in the email, I think I recalculated, and if you take away privately owned lands, it brings our total acreage to 35 acres of park space in our community. And Mariner Park should be reduced. Yeah, so there's other ownership of 14 acres, and there's no way Coleman can be 9 acres. So I just really think that table needs to be totally redone. As I said in here, we used to go twice a week to Tascadero, to A-Town Skate Park for our grandson, because they wouldn't let the kids with scooters at the Teen Center Skate Park. And that's not shown on this list, and I don't know why, because the bike park is. Now I understand from kids that they do. But we go to now the slow skate park when we want to practice pitching with him.
Barbara, let me remind you
I'm
to
done.
keep it to 3 minutes, okay?
Sure, well, that was about it. That we have to go to slow to use ball fields wherever we can. The kids practice. We practiced all this summer, all last spring at Cayucas for the Little League practices for the kids. We've gone out to Cambria for the batting cage for the all-star team to practice. We need outdoor recreation. You want an economic development, you want families, and you want a multi-generation community. You need more outdoor recreation area. I didn't see any light on, so I was waiting for your hammer. Thank you. Appreciate everything you do, and staff. It's a unbelievable task that you're taking on, but thank you for all your time and energy.
Thank you.
My name is Dorothy Cutter. The thing I'm very concerned about is the fact that you're going to look at zoning at sort of the end of this process, and I think that our zoning code is something that really needs to be addressed now, because according to our zoning code, a lot of very large houses are being built on small lots that would never happen in other communities. And the disadvantage of this is, aside from the fact that it changes the character of a neighborhood, it tends to knock out people's views, which decrease the value of their house. So people in this community who live here are losing a lot because we have not addressed our zoning. Now, other communities have much better zoning than us, and it's not rocket science. It's been discussed over the years. A lot of people know that our zoning is not adequate, and so I really think that you need to look at that. Thank you. Oh, and one other thing that I think you need to look at is this whole thing about vacation rentals, because that also really affects neighborhoods and will change the whole character of this town unless we give it some very serious thought sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak at this point? Very well. Seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back to the commission. We have a little bit of a discrepancy. We have in our agenda, it says consent calendar none, but we do have consent items listed under C1. So maybe this would be the time to address those. And that would be the revised vision and value statement and the revised community baseline assessment. And I think what we're being asked to do tonight is to simply receive and file them. So that would be the action. Question is there any comment, any discussion on that action? Well, I'm going to speak up on that. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. We've got 717 pages of revised community baseline assessment, and we've got the new draft community vision statement. I just wonder if we want to have some discussion about that before we receive and file them. If so, we could schedule it as a discussion item for a future agenda. If not, then we could vote to receive them tonight.
I do have something I'd like to talk about. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
I'll speak to that. I was unable to attend last week, although I watched it from home. I anticipated last time that we would because the meeting before, we had copious amount of input on the vision and values, and I anticipate that we'd be going over that and having the consultant show us where they put our comments into the document. But so I agree if that's what you're asking about, because I'm still waiting to see that input that we gave.
Right. We can't really discuss them tonight because it's not agendized. The question is whether we want to schedule.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you because we never did it, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, I anticipated that we would discuss all that input because all of us put in had a lot of issues, let me say, about it. So, and we never reviewed it. So, yes, I would support that.
I would support that as well. And I guess my concern primarily at this point is we talked early on about our current general plan being 1,200 pages or something like that. I managed to wade through the housing update that was passed in July of 2014. That was 200 pages. I don't know where this is going to end up, but I don't want a general plan that's 1,200 pages. I want a general plan that's 500 pages, 700 pages. And I feel like, and I may be totally off, that this is growing into this monster of language, and I'm just not sure where it's going to end. So you said there's 717 pages of
baseline assessment. And just to clarify, that will not be part of the general plan. That's a background.
Technical appendices. Yeah, we're hoping to have a general plan that's under 200 pages.
Seriously?
Absolutely.
Under 200 pages?
That's the direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because right now our general plan, local coastal plan is 1,100 pages. You can't use it.
That's correct.
And so I think a document that's more in the 200-page realm would be much more usable, and you can have references in their technical appendices to refer back to that other information for support if you want to know where policies came from, how they developed, that type of thing is perfect. So that's what we're looking at. We're definitely on board with the direction and the concern that you have. Absolutely.
Okay. And then the other comment I have about, we can comment and talk about this, but my feeling is that the issues that we've been talking about for the last 6-8 months are issues that were on the table a year ago. I don't see anything new. There's no, wow, what a surprise. Yeah, we should have talked about that. I feel like we've talked about everything ad infinitum, and we need to move this process forward. There are immediate needs that people from the public comment express that I agree with, and I would like to get this process over with. I think we're behind schedule, the original schedule, where we're supposed to be. I mean, I'm finding myself less and less interested to come to the meetings because I feel like we're rehashing stuff over and over again. And let's get it on and move this thing forward. That's where I'm at.
Bob, I would like to clarify. I believe I said vision and values. I meant the baseline assessment is what I was talking about. That's what we reviewed that meeting before last, and there was a lot of input, and I think you kicked it off, if I recall, because there were some inaccuracies you identified. So I anticipated we would see that reflected into the documentation. So.
Well, let's hear everybody weigh in. Let's get kind of a consensus here.
Yeah, I'll agree with what the other members are saying, and I would like to see a little more. I'd like to see what changes were made to the original document. some sort of annotation, color annotation or something.
Yeah, so we do have that posted on the website in a track changes format, so that you can see that we on the Plan Morro Bay page. Yeah, we obviously it's 700 pages, so we didn't hand it to you.
Right.
But it is there. We have it, I think, both in the finalized revised format and then the edit and then the track changes edit format on there for review. I guess, I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe that's, you go ahead and take a look at that, and we can agendize that. I'm not sure the next meeting, maybe, I don't know. We'll talk about it. It'll either be the September 29th meeting or the first meeting, the following meeting in October, and we'll put it on for a discussion item. Because again, you gave us a lot of input, and when you look at it, you'll see that Michael Baker made a bunch of changes to address concerns that you had. And I think it's appropriate to have a discussion about that, but certainly you need to review the changes before we talk about it. So I'd like to give you enough time because, again, it's 700 pages long, like you said, and there was quite a few changes that were made to it, so it might take you a little while to get through it. Okay? All right.
You know what would help would maybe if once Michael Baker gets that online to let us know so we could review it.
It's online right
online.
now.
I know, but how long has it been there?
Yeah, since we posted the agenda.
So, yeah, be nice to, I could look at it. I didn't know it was there.
Okay.
The link in the agenda goes to the finalized version, not the track changes version. So you'll have to go to Plan Morro Bay to get the track change version.
Yeah, the link actually goes to the Plan Morro Bay page. You have to choose which one you want to look at. But yeah, I mean, the point being is it's there. Go ahead and go and review it. We'll place it on a future agenda item for discussion so we can have that conversation. And I don't want to rush you through it because it is kind of a lot. So we might do it for the October meeting maybe versus the one at the end of September that we're doing, the special meeting.
So I think we're agreeing postponing it, this file would be better.
Yeah, sure. So you have, so you can at least look and see what the changes were made.
So I'm getting a sense that we want to look at it again before we file it. Is there a consensus for that kind of? But however, that doesn't mean we're not going to move ahead today with reviewing the key issues document, which is the next step, right? Because I mean, I think we all have a sense of the direction that we sent the CBA at the last meeting. So it's not like we weren't here. It's not like we don't know where that document is going. Okay, so do we need a motion to continue that item, or can we just do it, just agree to do it?
So yeah, I think he's going to pull that specifically out. We'll do vision and values separately, I think. Yeah, you can. Why don't you go ahead? I mean, making a motion it would be good. So we have specific direction in the record. Okay. I don't know why somebody would question why we're bringing it back, but in case it happened.
So could we have a motion to continue the discussion, to continue the draft community vision statement and community baseline assessment to a date uncertain?
I make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Then all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 0 unanimously.
Good.
Okay. Then moving on to our job for today.
Vision and values.
Pardon?
Vision and values was also a receive and.
Right, we continued both of those.
Oh, you're doing both of them. Okay.
They were both in the motion.
Oh, okay.
Okay, moving on to our new business.
I'd like to. Can I please?
Sure.
Yeah. Can we get clarification there? I didn't realize you were continuing the vision and values. What was the reason for the continuation of the vision and values?
I think it was to be able to track the differences from the original to the changes that were made in it, make sure that everything was covered. I don't know. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay, same reason?
And
I
I get,
have.
I thought it
I'm
was
sorry.
because it was on the consent calendar. Sorry, I don't have a
It wasn't on the consent calendar.
It wasn't on the
so we
consent.
didn't have a chance to vote.
I think that's what you were bringing
so-
up, wasn't it?
No, they're actually both sort of on the, they're not on the consent calendar in this listing, but they're listed as consent items under the next.
Yeah, I caught
listing.
that.
So
I mean,
I kind of,
So we have a third option, right? We could pull it and discuss it, couldn't we? Like if it's on the consent calendar, if it is actually on the consent calendar, we could pull it and discuss it now and just be done with it.
because of how it's on here, you can talk about it.
Okay.
If it, yeah,
I mean, if you
yeah, it's
wanted
an-
to, but
yeah, it's so. I mean, it does say receive and file, but you don't have to receive and file it. You can talk about it. Given where it's located, that was the preference, but it was put here so there could be discussion. That's why it's there.
okay. So then we have three choices. We could receive and file it as written. We could discuss it at this point, or we could schedule a discussion for a future date. Is there a preference for that?
I would like to proceed with the motion that we laid out and approved, because now that I know that we have it available online to read the changes, I'd like to do that before I approve a consent item on accepting a CBA that I haven't had a chance to review.
And we're talking about the
with the
vision and
vision.
values.
Both of them,
Yeah.
and the vision too. Yeah.
I don't know if the vision's up there and tracked. We'd have to get that.
Okay, so that I would also say the vision and values we don't have up there in track changes, but within the next day or so it'll be there by Monday.
So I guess we'll leave the motion as it is, but I just make a suggestion to help move the process along, as you were stating, is that I think if we could all provide comments, or if possible, if we could all provide comments to Scott in advance, it might well facilitate the discussion when we get to it. I mean, it's just as we need to look at what's been changed, if we give you our reaction in advance, it kind of could make things go more smoothly. So it'd be great if we could make an effort to do that. So then, now moving on to our new business, which is the continuing review of, it's a process, and I'll actually turn it over to Scott and let him introduce Michael Baker, and they can take us through the process.
Yeah, so I mean, we're continuing on and picking up from the last meeting on the key issues and policies report. I think we're on the economic section, is where we're picking up on it, and I'll turn it over to Michael Baker, I think, just to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Scott. Good evening, everyone. Bit of an outline for tonight. We addressed the receive and file items that are on the agenda for this evening, do a little bit of a status update, and then we'll walk into continuing the key issues and policies. In terms of status, we are continuing on with the community outreach portion of the work program. We are continuing to receive input on the key issues and policies. I know you've all been equipped with the cards and the materials to go to other meetings and receive input on that. We're also moving forward toward an October 12th workshop on the downtown waterfront strategic plan. And that is something that we are agendizing for your next GPAC meeting, to do a full presentation on the strategy for that workshop, the activities, and receive any feedback so that we can make any last adjustments to those as we move forward with that process. Very similar to what we did ahead of the previous community workshop on that portion of the project. On the key issues and policies, we're continuing to receive input through our discussions here, and at that point we'll summarize the input that we've received on the key issues and policies and prepare this document for presentation to the Planning Commission and City Council at a to be determined, in terms of schedule, joint study session. I'll skip the slide on the consent items and we'll go right into the key issues and policies update. Just as a reminder, the key issues that are addressing, on the one hand, a handful of required topics under general plan law or coastal act provisions, a number of important subjects that were raised through community engagement, and really emphasizing what we feel may be controversial items that would appear in the general plan or local coastal program that would really benefit from early discussion. The paper that's been presented to you is organized by topic. with both brief analysis and presentation of a number of policy options to consider, to discuss, and then ultimately to provide preliminary recommendations to the project team. And then the process for that begins here with the GPAC. We'll take the input that's been received from the GPAC, modify as needed the approach to the policy options and the analysis, and then present that to the Planning Commission and City Council, along with a staff recommendation that takes into account the public input that's been received and the input from the GPAC. And ultimately, the intent of these key issues and policies is to influence the land use and circulation alternatives that will be the topic of our meetings likely in October and November, and as we round out this year of the work program. So we were able to get through the first 3 of these topics at our previous meeting. The remainder of our agenda for this evening is dedicated to moving as far as possible through the remainder of these issues. I believe we at least have a goal to, if we can finish those off tonight, that would be wonderful. But we are prepared also to carry any remaining issues to the meeting that's been scheduled for 2 weeks from tonight. At that meeting, we will very much need to have wrapped all of these topics up in order to maintain the momentum that we need to complete the work program. So topic 4 is titled Economic Development and presents both analysis and policy options. The policy options are detailed beginning on page 16 of the report, and they consist of 4A, including economic development considerations in the land use plan portion of Plan Morro Bay. And that really hones in on 2 potential use types. 1, retail uses in terms of identifying what types of retail that the city may want to provide for and where they should be located, with the understanding that that has to be done in some ways in conformance with provisions of the Coastal Act. The Coastal Act does have certain provisions that do protect or prioritize both coastal dependent and coastal related uses within the coastal zone, and require the city to have at least one land use designation where those uses are prioritized. So that's one of the considerations that we need to take into account with retail. And then potentially office uses, and identifying locations, particularly for smaller professional offices that are appealing to the types of businesses that ultimately the city would seek to attract. And then the second item here, 4B, is to adopt business-friendly practices. And this is really kind of building off of some existing city efforts that are going on to attract businesses to locate to Morro Bay and to document ultimately the approaches that have been successful, particularly over the course of the last couple of years, to help direct future staff and future decision makers regarding how to interact with potential business owners for Morro Bay. And then 4C, making energy and telecommunication technology resources readily available to businesses. And that's essentially looking at technology infrastructure as a potential economic development strategy, and looking at investments in that technology that could then in turn attract and retain perhaps higher tech type businesses. So those are the 3 broad policy options that are presented for economic development. It's not to say that those are the only policy options, but we also feel that they're fairly broad in character that would allow for development of specific actions that could span a wide range of strategies.
A couple of thoughts about this. One of them was there's sort of another element of businesses that I think maybe the city, after that whole business license, I'm not going to call it a fiasco, but business license activity or efforts last year. There's sort of a third level, I think, of business, which is sort of home and internet-based businesses. And they seem to be somewhat prevalent around here, at least just informally, anecdotally from what I've seen. And I wonder if the city, if we might include some kind of element here to also encourage those kinds of businesses. And somewhere in here is about business-friendly practices. I think there should be some examination of the business license provisions. That may be the next level down of detail. But I think the idea of the less formal business structures that I think particularly people who are retired or have relocated here might be engaging in, that there might be some thought given to that in the plan.
I guess I have a sort of a big comment in it, and I think it's not totally dissimilar, or maybe it stems from the same thinking. There are three, interesting policy options here, right? And I do feel like it's kind of an assortment of things, and it isn't the same as having a strategy, sort of a comprehensive strategy that we would then tier policy off from. And it seems to me that in order to be able to analyze or consider these, I have to sort of situate them in a larger strategy. So I'm struggling with this a little bit because I feel like, the segment you just talked about, like I feel like a huge asset of this community is its demographic spread, right? And the fact that we have a significant retired population here. That's a piece of our demographic that's really big. So I think you have to think about that economically. What does that mean? What kind of businesses do you want to have now and in the future to support that population? And I think that comment's you're going to hear me say that over and over tonight. But, there's a visitor serving component, right? And so that's a segment. But we just kind of get these random commentaries about head of household jobs and, things that just seem quite disjointed. And I feel like we need to be thinking about this in some larger framework in order for any of this to make sense.
I have a comment on that too. We're always talking about having such a large segment of our population is elderly and retirement age, and we need to have businesses and things that relate to them. But as we plan forward for the next 25 years, should we be planning that this is only going to be elderly people here, or should we have businesses and things that would attract people of all ages and make families want to stay here? Because we don't want just retired people in this community. So I think we need to have make plans for all ages. And I also, is this the point where I give my opinion on the density? Because I agree with Barbara when she was talking about maybe making a larger setbacks on lots and stuff so you can't build as big a home as some of them are building. I live in North Morro Bay, and it just seems like one house touches the next. And they're all looking the same to me. And so I would like to have some kind of regulations in the zone, or is that when we get into writing the zoning plan that we take care of that?
Actually, I might ask you to table that for the very next issue that we've got queued up. But it's a good comment. And Scott, I don't know if you'd want to provide just a brief update on the economic development strategic plan.
Yeah, the economic development strategic planning process is a little bit on hold right now. As far as we have draft documents in place, we just haven't gotten to the point where we're fine-tuning them because that process resided with the deputy city manager, who's now been gone for a couple of months, and we have the new deputy city manager coming on board on the 17th of October. And so that effort's been stalled a little bit. We will get some more information out of that. In fact, we're just talking before the meeting with Chair Teft about this very thing and forwarding some of the economic development comments that have come out of these efforts on the community baseline assessments and in reference to the effort this evening. To forward the comments that we received so far over to Chabin Concept, who's doing the economic strategic plan, to see if they can address some of those items in that document. So paying attention to the only point being is we're paying attention to what you're saying and trying to maybe connect the dots a little bit here, and instead of just letting that process sit there, maybe have Chabin do some work to sort of fine-tune and tighten that up a little bit so we have some better inputs to our process here. So that's kind of the plan right now and what we just recently have been talking about just right before the meeting this evening.
So I have a little bit of a different take on it because I have a business in the business district, and I feel that because it's a general plan and because we only want it to be about 200 pages, I think it's okay to identify some of these goals. And I do think, in relation to what our public comment folks said, it really does tie into zoning to me. And it's kind of simple, and it's kind of identifying your districts and your uses. Are you going to do retail in a certain area? on the certain main streets, on the ground floors, allow offices on side streets and upstairs, maybe some residential. To me, this talks about how do you create a friendly and vibrant and usable business district. So I think it kind of does go hand in hand with zoning. You have to be thinking of that all the time as we go forward with so many of these issues, coming up on neighborhood compatibility stuff. It all ties in. So the zoning doesn't get left behind. It definitely, it's always in the forefront of my mind and has been for years now, as some of the challenges and problems of doing business. So, this is actually, to me, it's kind of a nice, succinct, brief, let's hit these bullets. As we move forward, as we think about how we're using that land, what coastal says, like should there be a real estate office down that one block up from the bluff? No, there shouldn't be. Should there be retail? Yes. Restaurant? Yes. Lodging? Yes. I don't know. I feel like you guys can tweak this to work for us, and always keeping in mind that it's also informing what's going to happen with the zoning. So.
Let me just, I like Melanie's comments about the context, and maybe if Scott can feed some information to us through this other strategic planning process, that would supply some of that. These policy options you have are, sure, they're all good. I mean, but they're so vague, it's easy to say yes to all of this. Getting into a little more detail, if we want to put together, ultimately we're going to be putting together a framework that has policy direction that should be clear enough that it actually says something specific and not that. And from this point, I can't do that.
Yeah, I think it's an issue of, I think you got to do the zoning, but I think also if you have a business district that you've zoned, but you don't have businesses to go in there, and all you have is office biz that want to rent that space, I'm having trouble tying in, and maybe this is in the economic development. Yeah, I mean, who's going to argue against business-friendly practices? People say, no, I don't think we should have those. Well, of course we should have those, but what are you talking about, and where's the business attraction or the business development part of this? And maybe it's in general, we have there's several other efforts going on, and I don't know about anyone else, but I'm not in touch with all of them, or maybe even most of them. And I'm having a little trouble trying to figure out how that comes in here, and maybe this is one element of that.
Fair enough. I think what will become clear over time is as we get into policy development, these are sort of overall guiding principle sort of statements about things that our policies are going to be based on. And so you're going to then see policy that does these things and gets more specific. Again, it's a general plan, though. So sometimes it might tell us to go do something more later. Or it might say, hey, your business-friendly policies, or the things that you don't have that are business-friendly are your stringent parking requirements. So go fix those in your zoning code as we do the zoning code update. So it'll be a mix of those things, and it'll become more specific as we do the policy development. Is that right?
I'd like to ask for maybe we can have this in a future meeting, but I would like to have some idea of all of the different things that are going on kind of around that maybe feed into this or this feeds into that. And how are they all going to be connected? And I don't feel that I personally have a good feeling for that right now or understanding of that. I'm not sure I even know what those other things are, much less how they connect to this. And it feels it's sort of what Melanie said, it feels a little disjointed at this point in terms of things going on here, over there, and then we have this here. And I know. Anyway, I think at some future time it would be very good to have a better picture, become a more complete picture of that.
Right.
I don't like the language of the business-friendly practice, because what I hear when I talk to business people is that the city is not friendly to business. And I would like to change this second sentence to something more direct, to say this: the city must document and institutionalize approaches that have been successful, if in fact we do have some successes.
I agree with that, Red, but I also, these documents are not the general plan. These are background information, places we need to go, things that need to be looked at, language you guys are going to be writing. And that's super important stuff for them to hear in terms of how they're going to write the language. But this isn't the language, in my mind.
But these policies will be carried forward into the general plan.
With greater detail, yes. And I think what we're kind of after in these discussions are, is this generally the right direction? And where we have questions like, hey, what types of retail does the city want to provide for? Those are good discussion points for if there's a type of retail that we really don't want to provide for because it doesn't meet with community character, great time to have those conversations, because then we can hone in on that as we're starting to look through the land use designations and the zoning.
So like we don't want a Costco, that kind of thing. Maybe.
Okay.
I mean,
Costco doesn't want to see.
Very precise, very precise example, very precise example, but the right idea.
I'd also say we don't need more than half a dozen thrift stores on one street.
So, taking off from what Melanie said too, and I guess incorporating with this business-friendly practice, I'd like to understand more about what that means, because I guess I assume you're looking down the road to project what businesses will be prevalent in the city in 30 and 40. So as technology, for example, is becoming more and more where the workers are spending 2, 3, 4 days at home going into the office. Will we address that as a home business? Will we recognize that, or will we put up barriers where they don't feel they can work from their home? I think we need to make sure all those things are covered, because I think what I'm trying to get at is in the bigger picture is that I can see in the future that it's not going to be the normal, just the normal brick and mortar businesses that we know them. Even though we retain our character, and we all want to do that, we're still going to have these different businesses that, going to be home-based businesses. And then what home businesses will we allow? I had a Hawaiian hula dancer lady business next to my house in Escondido, and that obviously doesn't work.
And a big pair of binoculars.
At 10 o'clock at night. So, but what I'm saying is, we probably address that more in the zoning revisions, but I think we need a brief discussion of it now.
Or that was the guidance they needed to hear, right? Just that the business-friendly practices, you just want to see a broader, when they get to the policy, you want it to seem more broadly defined. So maybe
Flesh
you
it out.
just gave them what they need to know.
Yeah, we really want to know if we're missing things.
Yeah.
If there are things you're really interested in and you're not sure whether we're providing for them or not, let us know that, because then we can certainly account for that as we develop policy. That's the information that I want to hear.
One thing you might add in this section, and I know we hit it in other areas, but the transportation thing, because whatever age of the population and however much we may or may not grow, having public transportation access to your business districts, older folks, it's great to have those places where, they can be driven to their doctor appointments or go to the pharmacy and have good, we don't have very many like handicap parking spaces or loading zone areas to be dropped off, picked up in the downtown, for example. You do in the Quintana corridor. There are places that people can pull up and get dropped off. But that would be something I think kind of fits with your business district, creating those transportation kind of options.
So I have a question for Susan and other business owners. At 4C, what are the resources that are not available now that a business owner needs in Morro Bay, just for my own information? High speed, so it's about, okay.
And, for a lot of us, that doesn't really matter that much. If we're brick and mortar businesses providing service directly to customers, high-speed internet, it's like whatever, don't really care. But a lot of businesses do. I think things like, and again, you're talking about these policies, the parking in lieu fees, that would be a very big challenge to a small business trying to come in and open a small restaurant that maybe had, 6 tables. Well, if you had to pay, $10,000, $15,000 per table, or, whatever your formula was. Now they've just modified that policy. Great move for the town. But there are things that I think we're not used to thinking of, because so many people on this board are pretty high-powered people. You guys come from pretty, dynamic jobs and communities. Lots of our businesses are just little people. We're little people. We don't have deep pockets. We started a business from scratch and from nothing. And if I had been told, gee, it looks like you're going to need 6 parking spaces, fork over that money, I would have been gone. I would have, it wouldn't have happened. So, and yet that's part of the character of this town and the beauty of this town. So, I think we need common sense kinds of requirements for businesses, common sense things when it comes to getting a license, common sense things when it comes to signage. We need to, realize some of our vacant lot spaces that could be used for parking for now. Why not? Just talk to those owners and make an agreement and do something. You can get too big and high with all this. It's kind of basic for most of us.
I'd like to say, as someone, I have a consulting practice, and I do work out of my home most of the time. The high-speed internet is very important. Also, the availability of local support services, accountants, web design, those kinds of services that could be purchased locally. I've had to sort of seek out my own services for those kinds of things, and it would be good to have. And maybe it's Chamber of Commerce. Maybe I should just go join. But I think the high-speed internet is a big one, and just the associated support services. I did have a big issue with business licenses. I was billed $2,500 for 4 years of I forgot what, and that was a big issue, obviously. And so it'd be good to get more communication going with the more informal businesses, I think, on issues like that.
Just to remind us, too, that the technology part on here, and I honor what you're talking about, but that was part of the need so that we can attract higher paying businesses into the city to raise the median income. So we can't lose sight of that, although at the same time recognize and honor your types of businesses.
I'd like to step back a couple of steps, because the issue here is economic development. And to me, economic development is a 3-legged stool, and so far we've been talking about half of one leg, okay? Because we're talking about only retail, okay, which is between retail, visitor serving commercial, and revenues generated by residents, dollar-wise, retail is the smallest of the 3. So we're talking about the smallest leg of a 3-legged stool, and we're only talking about half of it because we've been concentrating on the downtown area. And we have to remember Morro Bay has another commercial area, which is North Morro Bay, which really desperately needs the same level of planning that's currently being put into the downtown waterfront strategic plan. We have an area there that's really zoned kind of strip commercial for people going by on a 2-lane Highway 1, and we now have a 4-lane road with no access, with no ability to get off of it. And so I think we need to look, in terms of the retail side, I think we need to look not only at the downtown area, but we need to look at the North Morro Bay area as well. And I think we also need to broaden our thinking a little bit in terms of not just thinking of straight retail, but thinking in terms of light manufacturing. We need areas for that. That's a very good paying sort of segment of the economy, and we need to look at where that's going to happen and make attractive areas for that to happen. And I think that we also need to think about live-work units, which addresses not only the ability for smaller businesses to operate, but affordability of housing as well. So I think those are some issues that I think clearly need to be addressed. I also think that in terms of retail development, we don't necessarily have to go this alone, okay? I think we should be reaching out to Cal Poly, we should be reaching out to Cuesta, we should be seeking to develop partnerships with other communities in the area, so that we're not just necessarily trying to say, come to Morro Bay, we're trying to say, come to the Estero Bay area. We're trying to make the area attractive, and we're trying to also, get to people, get to young people, when they're trying to decide where to locate. When they're, I've got this great idea for a tech startup company, where do I go? Well, I got a call from, Scott Graham the other day about how great Morro Bay is. Maybe I'll go out and have a look at that. So I think we need to think about outreach in terms of developing new businesses. The other two legs of the stool are visitor-serving commercial and the commercial concerns of the residents. And so I think this chapter needs to look as well at our visitor-serving infrastructure. I mean, there are challenges there. There are challenges in terms of the fact that we really have an aging visitor-serving infrastructure. A lot of our hotels and motels are getting kind of long in the tooth, and maybe the city needs to establish some sort of revolving loan fund or other aid to help these business owners, kind of bring their properties up into the 21st century. The other issue that we have is that a lot of the properties in the visitor-serving commercial zone often are not large enough to support modern development. So the city perhaps needs to look at a policy of consolidating adjacent parcels in that area to encourage redevelopment and new development. Third thing is the R overlay. We've got a lot of, this is retail businesses as well as visitor-serving uses. We've got a lot of land which is zoned for that, which has been built with residential construction because of the R overlay. The R overlay needs to be abolished. That needs to go away. And I would, in terms of visitor-serving, I would want to encourage public-private partnerships, which will develop new spaces for visitor-serving uses, but also develop public spaces at the same time. In terms of the residents, affordable housing, we've got to have policies that relate to affordable housing, improving household income, improving the availability of jobs which offer modern benefits, pension plans, health care, that sort of thing. And we also ought to look at the impact of the increasing utility rates on the economic well-being of residents.
Scott, is you were talking about North Morro Bay and needing that emphasis, and as I recall, in the last update we had from Chabon Concepts, they really did focus on that part of the town because they felt that we had this Embarcadero thing happening, and then we had the connectivity thing in the downtown. So they felt that that was, the stepchild that hadn't been looked at closely enough. So they were actually coming up with some really interesting ideas of ways to revitalize that area. And I don't know if that's online somewhere or not.
I believe we have some of it online. I'm not sure if we have all of it online, but they did, create architectural exhibits to show improvements in those areas, to show streetscape improvements along North Morro Bay, because obviously, we have a bunch of entrances to the city there, right? And they don't look maybe the best. Again, some conversation we had before the meeting today, and identifying, ways to spruce those things up. So when you're coming into Morro Bay, you have a nice entryway from folks coming off of, say, 41. As opposed to what you drive into now, which is arguably a little bit of a mess, and certainly not one of the nicer, aesthetically pleasing areas of town for sure. You got some, vacant lots and things like that over there. So, those are all things. You're correct. Those are all things that they were looking at, and they did prepare architectural drawings to sort of, add suggestions for improvements for, again, streetscape type things, as well as intersection improvements. And then there was some other information in there related to the types of commercial uses.
Yeah, I feel like they had some ideas for the city on policy type ideas on how city staff and structure could encourage the current owners to develop their properties in different ways, different ideas with parking and outdoor, dining areas, and just different, even using that, the Spencer's parking lot in different ways. So,
Well, I would support
it was
incorporating
great.
some of those ideas into
yeah.
the general plan. I mean, there's also some opportunity. We shouldn't be so negative because there's clearly some opportunity. The Highway 41 Main Street intersection is developed, is in the process of developing actively. The area around Spencer's seems to be a developing node of neighborhood commercial. So it's not, there are opportunities there, but we need to look intelligently at what those opportunities are and how we encourage them.
I think it'd be nice to just have a continuous sidewalk in that area. That would be
one of the
start.
things the plan notes. It says, hey, look, you have all these, you have all these discontinuous sidewalks. That's not a great feature here. You should fix that. I mean, it notes that, so it does identify that right off the bat. It's one of the first things they looked at. So, right on point.
Yeah, safe ways to get over or under Highway 1 might be another, another issue. But getting hit by a car on the way to the grocery store tends to affect your appetite. Yeah,
Not a good economic development strategy.
No, not.
Okay, thank you for those comments. We'll just go from economic development to neighborhood compatibility. So, on this topic, obviously, there's we're plugging into an ongoing detailed dialogue that's been occurring within the community at the point in time that we're updating the general plan updating the general plan. And in doing so, we've identified a handful of issues. Obviously, there's a lot of detail that underlies these conversations, but there are 4 that we've identified. First, a recommendation to create a unified set of design guidelines with clear intent that balance restrictions with flexibility. And one of the things that, at least kind of from thinking about the perspective of urban design or community design as part of a general plan approach, for a town the size of Morro Bay with the complexity of issues that are occurring here, we've heard design guidelines come up in contexts for how to ensure cohesive design in the downtown and waterfront area, for how to protect potentially historic buildings, for dealing with neighborhood compatibility and mansionization and other residential standards. And I think just kind of from the perspective of a comprehensive approach, it would be good to consider folding those all into a set of community-wide design guidelines, because you could have guidelines that are tailored toward solving one problem that actually would create another. And so that's sort of, particularly when you consider a community the size of Morro Bay, you have, I think, the ability to look at that in a comprehensive way. The second is 5B, defining allowable sizes of new or expanded buildings. And considering that, this is really kind of getting to the mansionization issue that's particularly controversial here. 3, potentially limiting construction of new chain stores. And 4, establishing neighborhood boundaries. And I guess that's really a question as to whether or not, from this committee's perspective, defining precise neighborhood boundaries should be an objective of this general plan.
I want to have us be a little careful in a couple of areas. One of them is if you want to encourage families to be here, you have to have a home size that encourages families to live here. And sometimes that will be a larger size than maybe some people who are retired and are just a couple or a single person. So I think we need to think about, flexibility that way. I also think when I was listening to the whole debate about the parking and RV parking and the boat parking and all that, a huge number of the complaints were from the North Morro area and to some degree the Harbor neighborhood. There were not as many complaints from, say, the Heights. And so I think you've got different lot sizes. You've got a lot of different conditions, and I would hope that we have enough flexibility here to say maybe allow larger homes in some places, maybe in others you don't, because the lot sizes are small. So I think I want to think a little bit about, maybe unified guidelines might not actually be the right way to go. Maybe you do have it customized for different areas or different situations. Also, I'd like to see some thought about incentives. I think, for example, if someone is able to block, according to the rules, can block someone else's view, but you can maybe offer them incentive not to do that. If you do that, well, you can exceed your height limit by 3 feet if you don't block the neighbor's views. Well, if you're not blocking the views, maybe that's okay. And maybe, I'd like to see some thought about incentives, even where you have the rules you have, but maybe you allow some exceptions or some flexibility if people are willing to do more in some other areas than they really are required to. If they're allowed to do, provide additional parking, maybe they would be allowed to, if you have a maximum size, maybe they could go a little bigger if they would provide additional parking. I'm just using these as examples, but I'd like to see, in addition to sort of rules and things, some incentives for people if they're going to not impose more burdens on their neighbors, to allow some flexibility in those. In particular, if people want to build a family-size home, how might they do that within the rules that we're talking about here? Because mansionization versus 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom home for a family, we're going to have to think about how to get those things to be compatible.
So, I went over in this at home. I'm a little confused with the photo shows downtown. Yet we're speaking of neighborhood compatibility policy options. But yet the 4 items, one of them, and I think I heard Jeff speaking, it sounded like he was talking about commercial type properties, and he was talking about businesses. I like several of these, but I'm wondering, do we need to split this out into, business and neighborhood, residential neighborhood, or do we need to move some of these and replicate them in item number 4? And I also agree with the unified design guidelines. I don't think it needs to be citywide, because in residential, like you were saying, we have different nodes of neighborhoods that are distinct design neighborhoods. The Heights, for example, and then North Morro Bay, like you brought up. So to have a unified design guideline for the whole city just doesn't make any sense to me. And also it doesn't make sense to me for the economic or the commercial side, because we have the continuity of Main Street that connects the commercial from downtown Embarcadero out to the North Morro Bay, but that's on a continuity. It actually just stops. There's a section there when you follow in Main that it stops, nothing, no commercial, then it picks up again. So to have the whole city unified under one guideline, it seemed like they deserve their own set of criteria there and us back here.
I have I guess a question for clarification, but also a comment about it. We're talking about guidelines. And I remember when we went through that process, what was that, a year ago or so? The idea of the guidelines is a little bit squishy, because what came out of it were some ideas about masses and how they relate to the neighboring buildings and so forth. But there's another component that's more hard, more rule-driven, which is your setbacks and size restrictions, or how adjacent buildings and driveways can be used and so forth. And I think it's getting lumped together in here in a way that's not quite, there's a number of different tools we're talking about here, and it helps to have them clarified so that we know certain things can be accomplished with certain tools and not others.
Well, we're probably going to end up with guidelines and development standards. Development standards are your setbacks, your lot coverages, those types of things, building floor areas, second floor area ratios, those types of things. All things that will probably be under consideration as we talk about this. And then you have the overall guidelines, which is kind of the scale, height, mass, bulk type things. Or they can also include specific architectural styles if we had neighborhoods that were like primarily Victorian or something, but we don't really have that necessarily. But I mean, you can have guidelines that do those types of things.
And I think part of the question then, Scott, that I'm trying to clarify here is that the guidelines don't have the same kind of legal status that setback does. So there raises questions about how those are applied in different places. And it's just not clear to me how that does work out. If there is going to be an architectural review committee, is that what's anticipated? Or how does this work?
I don't know. Is there?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I could play this game. You know, I mean, so yeah, I mean, those are things that could come out of this. A lot of cities have them. There's reasons why they have them. Usually, what you design guidelines are a toolbox, right? You come up against issues and things in certain neighborhoods, and maybe it's a toolbox for the North Morro Bay neighborhood because they're small lots, and you know, maybe you tweak in wedding cake houses up there to pull back in second stories if you're going to have a two-story house there or something to provide that separation that you're talking about and provide more of that privacy, the issue that some of you referenced before. I mean, again, it's a toolbox of things that you can use when to address certain issues that you're trying to disincentivize or something like that. So I think that's how we designed the current set of residential design guidelines with the intent that we were going to memorialize them later through this process. And so that was the initial discussions that we had. And so I do see us going down that road. I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, let me just speak to that because we had extensive discussions about squishiness in the Planning Commission, and the current design guidelines are somewhat vague, I guess, for want of a better word, because we recognize that there would have to be sufficient latitude in them to apply them citywide. And once you start to get more specific, then you run into issues that really cannot be applied citywide. And so we felt that in terms of migrating those guidelines into standards that would be, harder, that this process would be the appropriate place for that to happen.
It seems to me that the place we need to start in this section is with neighborhood boundaries. Because of everything that we are all saying here, we have different lot sizes and different setbacks, and that pretty much dictates the size of your buildings in those areas. So if you're talking about neighborhood compatibility, it's going to be based upon the amount of land you have available to build on. So that's where I'd like to see this chapter begin, is with neighborhood boundaries.
You know what would be great to have with this, and I know we've already received it, but the map that showed the zoning, the R1, R2, the commercial, that would be helpful to, throw up there again in relation to this. And I know, again, that will come later when we do deal directly with zoning stuff, but to me, that the whole idea of boundaries, that's kind of what we're talking about, it seems to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's partly that, and it's partly the map that we've already seen, which is in, I think, the baseline document that does define the neighborhoods. I think that somebody had, that map exists. I don't know if anybody agrees that it's the right map or it doesn't need to be changed, but, so yeah, I mean, it seems like that should be like 5A, and then everything starts from there. But I do think that it sounds like the feedback, and I'm, it's really becoming more clear in my mind as we talk, that that this section needs to recognize that we are both talking about guiding development in residential neighborhoods and in non-residential neighborhoods, right? That both are important, and so that what happens in our commercial district, we have to guide that too. I mean, it's yes, I think in the subtext here, there's a lot of conversations about what happens in our residential neighborhoods, but that's not all that would need to be guided. So I just think that needs to be explicitly said here.
Yeah, I would say, number one, we have to define neighborhood boundaries. It's not just lot size. It's topography. Some lots are sloped, some are level. It's street width. It's parking availability. I mean, it's just not possible to make an effective set of guidelines that encompass the entire city. And I would agree with you that it's not just residential, it's also commercial. However, I would suggest that it would be far less complicated to do residential and commercial separately. And because, number one, the zones may not be exactly the same, okay? And number two, you're likely to have a different set of stakeholders for the residential guidelines versus the commercial guidelines, and your objectives may be somewhat different. So I just think from a logistic point of view, from a, in order, in terms of simply accomplishing it, it might be easier to separate and say, these are commercial guidelines, these are residential guidelines.
But you agree that, I don't think you're saying that all that work happens as part of the general plan update process. Are you saying that?
I think it has to get done by the time we get to the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Because I think that's something that typically, is impossible to happen concurrent, right? With the huge work of doing a general plan and a local coastal plan, to also do that at the same time. I doubt it's scoped right now. It's just what I'm saying. I just keep hearing you say it. I'm just not sure whether to forestall any huge disappointments later. I'm not sure whether that's, I think it's a hugely important item that needs to happen soon, but.
A couple of clarifications. One, there are design guidelines for the downtown and waterfront area that are coming forward as part of the downtown waterfront strategic plan. So for those areas, there will be design guidelines put forward for consideration and potential approval as part of this project. Two, in the context of the general plan, I do think it's possible to get at least as far as delineating the neighborhoods and perhaps defining the design intent for each of those neighborhoods. In other words, what are the things we're after with guidelines? And how do they differ neighborhood to neighborhood based both on existing character and future intended uses? I think that's a direction we could head at the general plan level to essentially get, do we have concurrence at the commission and council level on that design intent? And then as a follow-up to the plan, one of the action items could be developing the residential guidelines for those neighborhoods.
But I hear what you're saying, and I think that what you're describing is appropriate content for a general plan.
Correct.
But when we get to the zoning ordinance, on the other hand, we're going to have to say, this is the front setback, this is the side setback, this is the exterior, so we'll have to reach some degree of specificity during that process.
And with the general plan, without being real specific, could we say have height limits that pertain to everybody? I mean, residential or commercial buildings? Would that be in the general plan? Not a zoning?
Yeah, we will have height limitations. They won't be the same. They won't be the same in given neighborhoods, probably. No. We have problems right now with our height limitations in our say like in the downtown and whatnot. It's 30 feet. It's not an adequate height to build likely the types of commercial businesses and mixed-use projects that are going to come out of this, an economic development issue. And so we're probably going to be looking, and we've had conversations with Coastal and raising that a little bit. So we can have appropriate types of mixed-use development, because you can't, in 30 feet, you really don't have a commercial storefront with a residential unit above it. You have a 10-foot ceiling in a commercial space. That's not typically adequate, not something someone really wants for a commercial space. You typically want taller ceilings than that. And so you're constrained right now with equipment that would go along with that and with the requirements for elevators and things. Our code doesn't work for that. And so you're going to have different height limitations in different areas of town.
But currently the height limits are predominantly in the zoning ordinance.
Right.
Which is
where you would typically expect to find them.
That degree of specificity typically would be.
Right.
But to clarify, I heard you, Jeff, saying, kind of backing up my questions I had earlier, I didn't feel like they were all answered. You said that there's a design plan coming for the waterfront. So that's what I was speaking of. There's going to be different areas that's going to have their own unique design criteria, and we're still speaking to 5A, creating a unified design guidelines for the whole city. So is that going to be, are you then... Can I understand it better to say that we're going to have a unified design guideline with individual overlays for different areas that's going to speak to the nuances that are there?
The intent, and this can certainly be worded differently, I think the intent of this is not uniform design guidelines. Right. It's so that at the end of the process, the city isn't trying to administer 15 different sets of design guidelines.
Understand.
That's
And a-
more the strategy there.
And a document that an individual can pick up and understand where they're located, and these are your requirements for your specific area.
And that it's more a process of saying, if there are all of these varying design strategies, are they, when you consider one in isolation, another in isolation, are they compatible?
Exactly.
That's more what the unified is intended to get to. And is there a central administration role? Like if there is a design review committee of some sort, do you have a different one for residential versus commercial versus historic versus downtown versus waterfront?
Agreed.
Right.
And then finally, I guess as we're talking about moving 5D up to 5A, I still think, now that we've discussed this more, 5C just doesn't belong in there. I mean, why are we throwing in
Fair enough.
new chain stores in a neighborhood compatibility? Maybe it belongs over in economic development so that we clearly lay out to people the will of the people, that we don't want big chain box stores in Morro Bay, and people understand, although we're going to say we're adopting a business-friendly practice, but a caveat that we're not going to be business-friendly to large boxes, right? Okay, so...
Well, if we have residential guidelines and commercial guidelines, that might well fit into the commercial design guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it's set up right now, I think actually is pretty good, where you have the Albertsons and the Rite Aid is right near the highway. And so people can get off the highway and use those businesses, and residents can use those if they want to, but they don't impinge on the smaller, kind of more friendly businesses down in the Embarcadero and in the downtown. I actually think I appreciate the ability to go to a large grocery store nearby and not have to go into San Luis Obispo like some people do. And so I think that's... But it's in its own area. It's in a very logical area of town. And so it's in a commercial corner that's accessible easily from the highway. People get off, get on, and it works really well and doesn't interfere with the rest of the city kind of thing. So I think, I'm not sure if it belongs here in economic development, but I do think the way it's set up right now has some logic to it, and I'd like to see that maintained.
I think that the reasoning for it being here at this point was, I think, at least our thinking was, this is about the character of Morro Bay, and therefore kind of rides with the other design-related issues. I am hearing it's a stronger, maybe economic development focus. It could be in either location.
Yeah, when you look at it, Morro Bay has really sort of, from the commercial point of view, Morro Bay has really sort of defined its own neighborhoods. I mean, we have well-defined commercial areas, that are distinct from one another. And to a certain extent, it has defined the residential areas, although there's so many more houses than there are commercial buildings, that's going to require maybe a little more looking at to see where are the exceptions to the sort of self-developed standards.
To multi-generational community. So this one is responsive to one of the things that I think that, this issue goes all the way back to the study sessions that were held and kind of scoping out what are the big issues that the general plan should address. So this one we've brought forward as looking at, on the one hand, providing for multi-generational gathering spaces, thinking about, again, the potential aging, not potential, the inevitable aging of the community, and ensuring that gathering spaces and parks, for example, are equipped to adapt to the more potentially passive recreational activities that, as communities age, become more popular. Improving the accessibility of public spaces to ensure that all residents live, for example, within a 10-minute walk from a recreational area. This is also inclusive of improving the lateral and coastal access to the shoreline. And as we start to think about that in terms of coastal access, thinking about it also from the multi-generational perspective, that it's creating access points for people of all ages and abilities to access the coast. Then allowing for adaptive civic programming, again, ensuring that the types of recreational activities and spaces, for example, are able to adapt to those changes in the demographic character of the community, and then shaping land uses to support a multi-generational community, ensuring that land use designations are supportive of a range of housing options and would be supportive of accessible and affordable multifamily units for seniors as well as growing families.
I think the housing part is going to be a big deal. I think I was really happy to see the low-income senior housing that was built along Main Street. It seemed like a really good location, 2 blocks from downtown for something like that. It's very attractive, and I think that's the kind of I think we need to really look at those. If you want to look at affordable housing, I think you have to allow for some areas of high density, and along Main Street seems like a really logical place to put that. So I think also allowing for multi-generational housing. There are some, and I'm not sure how this fits in, but the idea that you have a home that is shared by multiple generations, or there's a granny apartment or something, but how not to turn that into a vacation rental, I don't know. But certainly we need to allow for those kinds of housing options where you have that kind of shared housing where different generations can live in the same place potentially.
Jeff, I apologize if you've given us some information before, but looking at our community vision, in 2040, what is our projection for seniors? How percent of the population? Do you have that? Or did we ever look at that?
Or just population?
So, I mean, if we're talking generally about, population also, but if we're talking about this, how important is it? I mean, I'm going to be past that time, but is it going to be a larger percentage than it is now?
Yes.
So there's a term that's a term of art that's being used a lot. It's called the silver tsunami. And, it's being used across the country, but it's a demographic shift that's being seen right now that, I think the number, and I don't remember numbers, so I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it's like 10,000 people are turning 70 in this country every day right now. And so it's because the baby boom was the baby boom, right? And so now the baby boom is aging, right? And so now the baby boom is aging. So, so it is a thing, and it is and to me, when I read all this and started thinking about it again, I'm a huge advocate of asset-based planning, right? And so this is an asset. Mm-hmm. It's not. I don't think it's a symptom of a dying community. I mean, I think it's one segment, and it's a really important segment of this community that you have to embrace and plan for. And I thought it started out, in this chapter talking about services, housing, open space, and gathering, right? Those were all the things that were mentioned. But then the policy, sort of lapsed into nice places to gather, and it sort of said, well, those other elements are going to deal with those other things. But there's a whole spectrum, and again, services to me are an economic development opportunity. I think mobility is huge, right? And there are very special mobility needs that are going to be only growing in this community. There's a whole host of things beyond the open space and gathering, things which are of course important too.
I think the services thing also it's a two-directional thing. If you've got a lot of retired people, maybe even an active retired kind of community, then there's services that maybe have volunteer opportunities, maybe they help with the schools, maybe, they may not want to do those things, but to the extent that people are active and willing to give the benefit of their experience and their time to community activities, to have those sort of activities available to them, I think is something we should give some thought to.
I totally forgot, right? And I meant to mention that. 2 things which I think would be really useful to refer to. One is that the Milken Foundation. I have been looking into this recently. I don't just happen to know all this. I've been looking into it for another reason. But so the Milken Foundation is undertaking this new initiative. It's called Gen to Gen, so it's generation to generation, and it is trying to pair the generations and ensure that folks are aging purposefully. And so I'm not suggesting that we're going to, that it's going to be a rule for living in Morro Bay that you have to live, age purposefully or whatever, but but that there might well be, there's some new policy guidance that's coming out related to that, and as well, the AARP Foundation has taken a huge role in this, and they are actually becoming a major funder in planning initiatives. It's something that the city should really be looking into with the size of our senior population. because the ARP is becoming a big player in planning because of the aging population, and they have a couple of really good policy guides that have come out that have addressed some of these subjects. So just something to consider.
Logic for my question was, as part of our task to get a general plan that is a working general plan until 2040, is that we should be able to gather the data, knowing what we have, our percentage today, and what resources do we have. So we have 30%, but we only provide 20% of the required services for that 30%. And then down the road, if it's going to increase, what's going to be the shortfall in 2040 so that we can start planning as we go to provide these services for the people as they age, instead of getting caught like we did with water, not raising the rates for 20 years. Yeah.
I'm bothered, though, by the assumption that the people here are just going to continue to grow old until they die, and nobody's going to come in to replace them. If we just plan for everybody to grow old, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think perhaps one of the aims of our general plan is going to be to rejuvenate the city and not just plan for everybody to...
Which is why it's called multi-generational.
If you have a way not to age, I'd like to hear about it. Right.
And I agree with Red on that. We finished it? Because I think the silver tsunami is going to pass. And then, so if we're planning everything for that, what happens later? We have a younger generation. We have everything only made with older people in mind. So I think we have to keep all ages in mind as we're planning.
Right. And you know, the intent of this is to remain a topic about being multi-generational. A lot of the conversation naturally trends toward aging in place and providing services and tapping into the resources provided by an aging population.
Could you define multi-generational? It's used a lot. It's not a term that you hear a lot in common use. Could you just, what's meant by that?
I'm going to wing it in terms of what I hear when I hear that term, which is a community that provides for the needs and benefits of people across the entire age spectrum, from, you know, essentially from birth to death. And that there are resources available in the community and activities that, and the resources available in the community, retail services, educational, recreational, and space needs are met for all of those generations. And that, and ultimately it's hopefully a community that benefits from dialogue between those generations.
But then wouldn't the corollary to that be that it would be rational to provide those services to each generation sort of in proportion to the numbers of those generations? In other words, that the allocation of the services would be based on demographics, right?
Which means the allocation of those services needs to be adaptive to how those demographics shift over time. So
right.
it essentially, it's kind of a systems thing of making sure that, you know, as we provide these spaces, services, needs, education, et cetera, that it's done in a way that can adapt to, you know, what happens when the population curve is high in elderly and low in younger, and what happens when it swings back? Right. What happens if it evens out?
So, I mean, in all due respect, okay, I don't think we have a choice. You know what I'm saying? The age curve of the population is going to be what it is going to be. I think our options to change that, to change the demographic profile in Morro Bay are very limited. But the option is to provide for the population that is here and that we anticipate is going to be, and plan for the population that we anticipate is going to be here.
I think one of the things you can do, though, to plan for both, and I just returned from a week in Pennsylvania visiting my 88-year-old mother in a Quaker retirement community, which was fabulous. A lot of independent living, but it went on to extended care. Very active, very vibrant people. And a lot of consideration of the intergenerational stuff. But what I saw is you do need housing options that are smaller, less to take care of, easier to handle, affordable. That will help younger families if and when they come in. Families, what we're seeing now, they're having 1 point however many children. They're no longer having 2, 3, 6 kids. Obviously, there are exceptions, but overall, fewer kids to support this aging population, but the young families coming in would appreciate those smaller, more affordable houses as they're getting going. I have 2 kids who couldn't afford to live here in this town unless some things change. So, as we look at a plan, are we going to plan and zone for some areas that are going to actually have yards for children to play in? Which could starter homes. I raised my kids, 2 children, in a 2-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. It can be done. It's not fun, but it can be done. So I think we need to plan for it, think about it. One of the huge industries I think we need here is better medical care of all kinds. I think we need better daycare. I don't think we have as many good child care options as we need in this town. And that would support people coming in, with young children to say, well, I can work and my kids can be in the same town. And so I like the intergenerational approach. And I think you're right. We've got to make it flexible enough so it can go either way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having smaller, affordable houses for any end of the age spectrum. I think Morro Bay hits the middle pretty well. If you're fairly vibrant and active and can get around well and get up and down our crazy sidewalks, and you're okay. But the other ends are a little more challenging.
Susan hit on 2 very key aspects of this multi-generational, and that's the medical service, both for the elderly and for children. We do not have any pediatric medical service in Morro Bay. We don't have a hospital in Morro Bay to care for the elderly. My experience with people who become very old and infirm is that they move near to medical facilities. And if you're going to plan for multi-generational community here, a key element of this chapter is going to have to be medical services for both ends of that generational spectrum.
I totally agree. That's what I was getting at when I said services. I think that's a lost opportunity, to have here. But I just want to end with a metaphor that maybe is going to strike you better than Silver Tsunami, because I don't think that went over very well. So the other framework to think about that might be more positive to some is this other idea is this 8 to 80 cities, right? So this is another movement in planning, and Enrique Peñalo's South American mayor came up with this, but it's moving to the U.S. And so it's this idea that we need to, and again, I'm going back to mobility on that, that, we need to plan for a mobility system that works for people who are 8 to 80, and particularly people at either end of that spectrum who are the most vulnerable. So I just think that whole range of issues and considerations needs to be reflected in this multi-generational section.
And when you think about that, in some ways, that puts less stress on our city infrastructure. So if our fire department isn't having to go out on medical calls, however many times a day, 10 times a day, most of their calls are medical, and chances are for the older part of the community, if we had those things there, that's less stress on that system.
Just have one comment about, most great cities have great parks, and I think we need to find out how big our parks actually are. And we need to really focus on them as, I don't care what the demographics are, 100 years from now at Morro Bay, I think the parks will always be important to any generation, any age group, so I'd like to see us put some emphasis on that.
Yeah. I think one of the good points, one of the key things that's been brought up by this analysis has been, it's not only the number, the size, the acreage, but it's the accessibility. You know what I'm saying? How many places in town do you have to walk more than 4 blocks to get to a park, or more than 2 blocks to get to a park, or whatever the criteria is? You have to walk a long way from City Hall to get to a bench now.
Okay, let's go another one here. So we're now entering the issues with the wave icon by them, which means these are issues that are driven principally by the Coastal Act. So these are, for example, items that we are bound by law to address as part of the local coastal program, from a policy perspective as well as eventually a code perspective. This first one is coastal access, and it's essentially driven on the principle of California Coastal Act. One of the things that it protects is the right of every Californian to access the coast. And that's something that's guaranteed by the California Constitution and something that is ultimately expressed in the Coastal Act and then passed to local jurisdictions to determine the mechanism to provide that access. But that, this is generally meant to ensure that jurisdictions aren't adopting policies or standards or programs that would inhibit the ability of any Californian to access the coast. It's not about necessarily just folks who live in Morro Bay or folks who live in San Luis Obispo County. It's any Californian. And so that's ultimately the basis for the coastal access provisions. And there's three policy items or policy options that are presented here. And as we begin to discuss these issues, just want for full disclosure to note that, we're bringing these issues to the GPAC. We're also attempting to set up some time with Coastal Commission staff to begin to go through with Coastal Commission staff the approach the city would be taking to these coastal issues, because there is the responsibility of the Coastal Commission to ultimately certify the local coastal program following the City Council's adoption of it. So they have requested, and it's actually a term of the grant agreement, for early consultation on a lot of these policy items to ensure that as we're devising the locally appropriate approaches to these issues, they're able to advise us on the compliance of that approach with the Coastal Act from the Commission's perspective.
So, Jeff, I have a question about that. Can you describe some general options for cities with respect to the Coastal Commission, what they accept, what kinds of things they deal with, and how those are structured, maybe in some different cities?
Yeah, and we can do that as we go through each of these particular items, because the issues are essentially different depending on these items. For coastal access, we're essentially looking at two different ways of providing that access. There's lateral and vertical, which to me always are kind of the opposites of what they sound, in the sense that the vertical access is essentially kind of going from the city to the coast, from the land to the coast. The horizontal access is, or the lateral access is going up or down the coast. So that's ultimately where a lot of these strategies go. And Morro Bay has got some unique things going on with the Embarcadero, for example, in the terms of, there are agreements and legal provisions that have established specific things that can and can't occur on the Embarcadero, specific mechanisms of ownership and lease on the bay side of the Embarcadero and whatnot. A lot of communities, in terms of coastal access, you've got a lot of communities where they're kind of on a straight grid that's parallel with the coast, and just about any east-west street that abuts the coast provides some form of coastal access. There are others where, the orientation of the community is such that that access is more limited, therefore each and every access point is precious and needs to be protected. I think for Morro Bay, you're kind of in the middle of that perspective, in the sense that you've got the Embarcadero, which provides considerable access to the coast, but you've also got a handful of these locations such as the Rock and Morro Bay State Park and a number of other places where these are attractors. They're things that bring people specifically to that portion of the coast. So what they're looking for ultimately, they being coastal staff, what coastal staff and the commission are essentially looking for is assurances that existing access points remain such that there aren't land use policies that are adopted or infrastructure build or other things that would block existing access points from being viable. And in some communities, there's a desire to create additional access points, particularly if it's an underserved community where there are opportunities for additional access. I don't really feel like Morro Bay is in that particular camp, because I think you're in a position where you're providing a lot of very diverse types of access, recreational, economic in terms of the fishing industry, tourist access, and there's a variety of different things that you're offering. So in terms of the options that are placed here, one is to take the opportunity of the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan to improve lateral connections along the Embarcadero, particularly the bayside then of the Embarcadero. And in fact, that is something that was written into the most recent round of coastal grant funding for the local coastal program update, and that funding application was successful. So we actually now, as part of this work program, have a dedicated pot of money to address specifically that issue. So that's something that we're intending to work into the scope of the Downtown Waterfront Strategic Plan. Secondly, preserving and enhancing vertical access points. And that's essentially, maintaining the existing high level of vertical access, and analyzing ways that you can improve accessibility then. I think that's related to what we were just talking about with parks in general. Is there's a lot of great access points to the coast. Are they all universally accessible? And are there ways of improving the accessibility of the accessibility of access points? Doesn't sound right, but I think that's ultimately what we're after, is are these accessible to a wide range of people? And I think that ties in with some of the multi-generational things that we were just discussing. And then another issue there could be adequate parking, as well as the potential to provide multimodal transit modes to, in lieu of parking. If there's a desire not necessarily to expand parking at the access points, are there other ways of increasing circulation and mobility to those locations? And then the third piece of this is the California Coastal Trail. This is a particular specific provision of the Coastal Act, whereby the Coastal Commission is charged with completing a trail that would extend from the Oregon border to the Mexican border. And ultimately, one of the things they're looking for local coastal programs to do is to maintain and enhance that linkage as well.
Question. Now, is that, I'm going to apologize in advance for if it's an ignorant question, but I know there was some discussion about completing a bike trail from Morro Bay, say, to Cayucas and maybe beyond in that direction. Is that what this is, or is that some other thing?
They can be the same.
Okay.
But ultimately,
they are currently at this point not identified as the same thing.
Right.
It's a separate effort.
Okay, yeah, because I thought the bike trail was further. I know we have the bike access now, the bike path that was new, but I thought the bike trail to Cayucas was on the other side of the highway or something. And
The county does have a plan in place to do that right now. They're running into some issues in the area where Chevron owns property, getting that next section put in place because they can't get the easements.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm wondering if maybe we should have some discussion of those, if they're not the same thing, how maybe they should be or could be the same thing, and maybe some resources could be combined to make that happen.
Right. One of our obligations in the local coastal program is to essentially delineate the city's preferred alignment for the California Coastal Trail through the jurisdiction. And there are portions of it that are currently designated, but there are gaps. And one of the things, for example, the lateral access along the Embarcadero could do is help to resolve some of those gaps.
Yeah, as we go through the process, it would be good to get some idea, maybe through maps or whatever, to know, if you got the bike thing and then you got this thing, where are the gaps, or where are the parts that are not gaps, and give us a better idea of the geography of it.
Jeff, along with that question that Susan asked, are there specific criteria for it to be accepted as California Coastal Trail, in other words, with design requirements, materials, et cetera, that we would maybe need to be aware of to see if part of our lateral access could maybe be part of that? Is there going to be, will their guidelines trump what we're doing as a...
Right, my understanding is no. There are portions of the California Coastal Trail that are literally just Highway 1. And so it's not, I think when we envision this, it's not from border to border like a Class 1 trail with a striped line down the middle that's a bike trail. It takes different forms. Some of it is hiking trails, some of it is open highway, some of it is beach.
So I would like to know, and I think maybe other people would like to know, what are the, what are the requirements for if we accept part of it as our responsibility? What are we required to do to keep it part of the California Coastal Trail?
All right, ultimately, then, it would be protected like a coastal access point.
Okay, but I mean, are we required, the city, to maintain that part, I would assume, from border to border of the city? And then when it gets out into the county picks it up and maintains it as far as whatever, trash, maintenance, washouts, et cetera, et cetera?
Right.
Is there going to be a requirement on the city's side to do that? I mean, I'm all for it.
No, my understanding is it's not that precise. It's really more assisting the state in identifying, what are the components of this end-to-end trail that are within your jurisdiction.
This seems like a feather in our cap if we can do it, I would think. To advertise that we're part of the California Coastal Trail with the way we've written our vision and values and our outdoor activities. So it would be kind of cool to say, hey, we're part of, like we're a tree city and we're our wildlife. So anyway, go ahead.
There are other sections that have been planned in the county, I believe between Estero Bluffs and the northern county line, and then maybe part of the South County. So there are documents that you can look at out there if you want to see how it has been done already.
So normally what would happen is, the city would wish to be, have portions of its trail system or designated part of the California Coastal Trail, and then they would come out and take a look at it, and they're like, yep, that's good, and then that gets mapped, and that's how it happens. I mean, it's not a lot more complicated than I just described it, because when I was in Pismo, that's what we did. And so portions of the bluff top trails that you'll see that run through Pismo have the little, the little emblems for the California Coastal Trail. It literally happened because we asked them to come and look at it and say, we'd like it to be this, is that okay? And they're like, yep, can you give us a map that shows that? I'm like, here's your map, okay. You have it now. And that was the process. They came out and walked the trail with us one day, and then, within several months it was recognized. So,
Scott, if it's that simple.
Coastal Conservancy, doesn't the Coastal Conservancy publish a book still that has the alignments
that sounds very familiar, yes.
I think so, yeah, I used to have it.
If it's that simple, wouldn't the stretch of beach from the Rock to Cayucas Pier already be part of the California Coastal Trail?
I think the only reason we don't have some of it in the city now is because the city hasn't approached them to submit the proper paperwork to make that happen. That's my thought process.
Right. And just for everybody's common benefit, the way this is written in the report to this point is that the beach from the northern border of Morro Bay to the end of the Morro Strand State Beach is one component of it already. Okay. And Highway 1, starting at Morro Bay Boulevard, is the second component. So there are two designated components of the CCT already in place. The objective, we have the opportunity with the LCP, if those aren't the right segments from the community's
It seems like they're
perspective.
totally disconnected. I mean, like the ones in, they're really separate.
Especially with the bridge open now, the bike bridge open, that should feed into it, and we should get those little plaques on the bridge.
Right. So one of the things we have the ability to do with the LCP is designate the alignment we want and move that forward.
Just to speak a minute to the idea of lateral and vertical access, we have very good provisions for lateral and vertical access in the waterfront master plan. They're very strong. However, the dimensions, especially for lateral access, may not be what the Coastal Commission, I think we're requiring 8 feet and the Coastal Commission wants at least 10 feet. What we do not have, however, is provisions for lateral access north of the Embarcadero and south of the Embarcadero, and in terms of, at some point in here it speaks about incorporating these into the downtown waterfront strategic plan, but unfortunately that covers even a smaller area than the waterfront master plan. So those provisions really need to be part of the general plan so that they cover the entire coastal area rather than just the Embarcadero itself. And the other thing, guys, let's be real. The biggest impediment to public access in Morro Bay is parking. not only on the Embarcadero, but on North Morro Bay. You know, you go up to the state park up there, the state beach up there, on the weekends, there's people parked on residential streets from here to Kingdom Come, you know, and so if we really seriously want to improve access to the coast, what we have to look at is primarily, before anything else, is parking.
But dispersal too. I mean, because I just always think about this street right here and this parking right here and the stairs that go down to the Embarcadero, which I personally use all the time. And I feel like I'm the only person, and my husband and I are the only people in Morro Bay. Yeah, and we just never run into anyone, you know what I mean? Right, it's a little bit risky, but, and it's getting more so all the time.
But if you're not from Morro Bay, you don't know about
No, but
parking
that's what I'm
up
saying.
there,
So I'm
you know.
saying maybe
No.
there's also resources that we just need to sign, you know, that point people to.
No, and oftentimes there's parking available in the front street parking lot. The truth of the matter is, during busy periods, it's worse in North Morro Bay than it is in the Embarcadero.
But wouldn't that also get back to better signage everywhere, places for people to park, and shuttles to move them to where they need to go, so that you're not impacting the neighborhoods with the parking? And, you know, the Spencer's lot, which is empty, you know, maybe there's a quarter usage of that most of the time except Thursday afternoons. That'd be a great place to park and ride, you know, get that trolley going up there and shuttling. And all that takes is signage, because the trolley's there, especially in the summer months. People don't think about that, though.
That could be part of, I mean, that's part of the solution, but I mean, that's the kind of thing that has to be thought about in order to really provide adequate access. I don't, there may or may not be just plain enough parking spaces for peak periods, but.
Just a question that I don't know the answer to on. When you speak to the broader discussion on California Coastal Commission, can I be safe to assume you're only talking about the public parts of those properties? You're not talking about private access, or is that included? In other words, you can't force people to open up access next to their house to go down to the beach. Is that right or wrong? I just don't know, because I wasn't raised here. So
I don't think you can go to an existing house and say you have to have lateral access, but you can require it as part of a development proposal.
Okay. So we are speaking to public access and future private development.
I think
then.
development and remodeling, if people are
Okay, so
remodeling their.
bring that up, so that language is going to have to be in there
Do
to
that.
cover that, okay?
Because when you said the biggest impediment was parking, I thought you were going to say Dynegy. I thought you were going to say the power plant. Because I feel like it's, you know, it's such a huge acreage that really you can't get through it. You know, you can't get through it to the waterfront. And it would be really helpful to be able to peel off of Main Street and get through it to the waterfront, as opposed to having to come up here and go around, you know, and to get out. So, yeah, just a thought.
I think that's an example of the kinds of, going back to the earlier portion of our discussion, the kinds of things that we need to hear in these sessions is, hey, as we think about the potential future uses of the Dynegy site, improving coastal access is probably going to be one of the key objectives we need to look at. Is, you know, it's a big block to coastal access in a certain point. As that area potentially takes alternative uses, is there a way to increase the number and quality of access?
Well, not to mention the whole, I know we haven't gotten to it yet, but the commercial visitor services, if you want to have low-cost accommodations, you've got to have, you know, you've got small lots everywhere, basically along the Embarcadero and small properties, but there's this giant, they're like the 800-pound gorilla for this whole town. And, you know, that's maybe a good place to think about low-cost accommodations. It's not right on the water, and you have land available to do something with of some scale. The power plant property, yeah. So I feel like I'm really eager to get to where we're going to talk about that property and and decide what we're doing with it, or what we are not doing with it, but what we will encourage Dynegy and with a carrot or a stick to do something with it.
The other aspect that should be kept in mind when talking about access, though, is it's not just being able to get there, it's also being able to do what you want to do when you get there. So we need to look at facilities. You know, do we have enough places for people to launch their boats? Do we have, fishing off the pier? There's like one spot on the South T Pier that you can park because the rest is completely occluded with giant boats. And so there's always like 20 people in this one little spot hooking each other. Boat fueling facilities, haul out and repair facilities, that kind of thing. I mean, that's all part of access to the coast, I think.
Didn't some town just get wheelchair accessibility that were created for going on sand? Somebody just did that.
I think we actually have one. Pismo has 3 or 4 of them. I know when I was there, they had them. So yeah.
There are beach wheelchairs.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of thing. Do we have one?
Yeah. And there are certain access points where they would work. They're not very well signed, though. I mean, one of them, probably the best one is in the state campground up there.
Flat, straight out shot.
I will. Okay, just for benefit of the chair, we have reached 6 o'clock. I guess I would ask if it's the will of the committee to either adjourn or continue.
I think we have a couple of members that have commitments. How do the rest of you feel? Do you want to push on a little bit, or
I'm happy to continue.
we're going to?
But I hate to lose people.
We're going to lose 2 members, so probably it's not. It probably is better if we just. So.
It seems a little bit contrary to Brown Act when we didn't advertise it for 3 hours.
Actually,
Splitting hairs
yeah.
maybe, but it is kind of.
I would have been able to make arrangements had I known, so I
Yeah, if I'd
apologize.
known.
But
We didn't know.
Yeah.
because I think it would have been a good idea, actually.
Yeah, I literally, when I was asking about it before, they weren't sure whether they were going to have it. And the next time they got back to me was today.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was, oh, thanks. All right.
So can we take a
Okay.
5-minute break, maybe?
I think we're going to adjourn.
Really?
We have
Okay.
a pretty sizable number of people that have to go. So
We can finish next meeting. We can finish.
then we are down to committee member closing comments. Are there any
9 to go.
closing comments, future agenda items, expressions of disgust?
And I think we'll have to do another 2.
I'm pleased. I think we're doing great. I think I would really suggest to the rest of the board members, if you have the key issues and policies report, review the background writing on it, not just the bullet points, because a lot of the concerns and questions really were covered in a lot of your background stuff. And if you even go back before that to all those supporting documents that you gave us before, it all does start to come together as a sort of cohesive picture. I think you've done a good job. I know it's hard sometimes for us to see where are we going, but you're definitely taking us somewhere with this. And I had them printed out for me. Go ahead and do it. This is the key issues and policies report.
Yeah.
I did not want to print it out myself, but this is not that hard to track and follow. So.
I missed that it was available.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's available.
It's actually written on the agenda. It tells you can get paper copies of anything. And we will always make paper copies for you, and typically the same day unless you call me at 4:55, at which point, and I still might even do it then. It's just, I'm not, then it's me doing it, so it might take forever.
It's much less than 700 pages.
I do have a question. August 22nd, you sent us an email asking our availability for a second meeting, but I never heard back from anybody. So,
It is going to be 2 weeks from tonight on the 29th at the community
did you get
center.
an email?
Yeah, I think you got an email at the end of last week that indicated that we were having the meeting. I think Cindy sent it out. So.
No, I didn't.
Is that the
Because
city email?
I responded to you the same
Or
day
the-
and said, yes, I'm available, but I never heard back. So,
Same here.
You might check and make sure that your GPAC email address is going to your regular one if you have one.
I'm getting them from both. I'm getting,
Okay.
like, Gina sent me some stuff on my personal one, and I get it on Exchange also, so I'm getting them both of them. But
I'm sorry, I don't know why it wouldn't have gone to you. I mean, I know we sent it out. I'm not sure what the. I mean, it's a group email. We don't like pick each one of you and send it. It goes to GPAC and all of you are on it. So I'm not sure what happened there.
So
Yeah, I got it. Can I ask a different question? Just something I haven't heard you say. As part of the initial outreach process, did you do, I know you were doing stakeholder interviews for the waterfront strategic plan. Did you do them for the general plan too? Was there a round of sort of stakeholder interviews?
we did not do them at the vision stage. We plan to do them on these key issues, and in fact, we're devising the approach to focus groups for review with staff at this point.
Okay.
So we're planning to assemble a series of small focus groups that are driven to sets of these topics.
Okay,
Right.
because I've been thinking, when I think about some of these issues, I know people have to go, thinking about some of these issues, I just feel like I'm not an expert, and I would love to know what the experts that you convened in, particularly when we get to fishing, let's say, it's like, I'm, care deeply that we get it right, and I'm not the one that's going to be able to, provide that input. So yeah, that'll be really
So
great to
on
get
those
that.
issues, we're going to take GPAC input, those focus group inputs, combine those as we're sending that off to planning.
It would be good
Commission
to get a
Council.
plan, some briefing or some information on how how you're going to put the focus groups together
Agreed.
or something like that.
Agreed.
Just
Yeah,
your
as soon
plan
as,
for
as
that.
soon as we've reviewed that information with staff.
And
we'll bring it
just
to
as a
committee.
follow-up on that, are there going to be additional public workshops on the general plan?
There are on the alternatives process, once we kind of get through these key issues. So I would anticipate those, best time of the
Okay.
year to do public outreach over the holiday. but realistically, we need to determine when those meetings will occur, considering the holidays, considering the grant schedule that we're under. We're definitely getting to the point where we're starting to really feel the pressure of the schedule.
8
and
o'clock,
the need
January
to
1st.
really make
Right.
forward
8
progress.
a.m. January 1st.
Can we pretty much anticipate the next meeting will go more than 2 hours? Because we only covered a few bullets.
I was going to
today.
cover just a
Good stuff.
handful of logistics things, and then we'll get you out of here. One, the next meeting 2 weeks from tonight, I agree. I guess, one, we need to understand if we have the facility beyond 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's at the community center, and what's the time frame?
It's 4 to, what is it?
I thought it was set for 2 hours.
I think it's set for 2 hours, but we can adjust that with facilities.
Yeah.
Bump it.
So
So I think we'll make every attempt to see if we can get the facility for a longer duration, right? And agenda items we have to bring to that meeting are a continuation of this, as well as I'd like to spend at least a dedicated hour on approach to the workshop for the downtown waterfront strategic plan. So we will probably agendize this at the early portion and then reserve the last hour of the meeting for discussion of that workshop, which I'd also like to ask you all to mark your calendars for. It will be October the 12th, which I believe is a Wednesday.
yeah, Wednesday.
Right, that workshop will be on October the 12th. We will be asking GPAC members to have an active role in that workshop as well, from 5 to 8 p.m. at the...
Okay.
How much time do we have to get public input on this? Just give us an idea. I'm sorry. How much, when is public input useful to you? To what point? How long can we continue to try to get input on the key issues?
Early, often, and at all times.
So, all right, forever. Okay.
Early, often, and at all times, all the way up to the final hearings. Right.
We want to make sure we always want to take input, especially if it's things that we're not considering. That's the worst thing is you get to the end of this thing and then somebody comes out of the meeting and is like, well, what about this? And then there's no discussion.
Silence.
It's not
Yeah.
touched on it. And the council just stares at us. Why didn't you do that? We don't want to be there. So that's kind of the point behind that is we'll take it whenever we can get it. So
Right.
we don't have that moment in time.
Right, and depending on our progress on these issues at the next meeting, let's also maybe be prepared for discussing another 2-week turnaround interval. We really need to make the progress that we can on these issues. I think this discussion is extremely valuable. We are getting the input that we're needing to move forward. We just got to try to keep moving.
And we got to make sure that the last couple of issues don't get short shrift because we've
Exactly.
spent all the time on all the other ones.
There is one procedural issue that I promised Scott we would discuss at this point, and that is there have been
your mic.
There have been a number of written materials that have been submitted at various times. I know the the results of some public workshops. I know different people have submitted written comments on various portions of the plan from the CBA going forward. Typically, at the Planning Commission level, okay, those comments and other comments from the public are made part of our agenda package, and we get a chance to look those over. So the question is whether the GPAC would like to have those. Is it just
Yes.
more chaff in your
Yes.
mailbox? or-
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Yes, please.
So a lot of that is online right now. We just haven't been including it in the packet. And so as we get correspondence and input moving forward on the items that are coming before you, we will have a section that deals with correspondence specific to those. And then we will be then placing them in the area on the website, so anybody can just look at it whenever they want. So the input that you've gotten from the outreach that you've done individually out there and provided back to us is posted online. Yeah. So under the Plan More Bay page.
So that was the shortest discussion we've had all evening, right? Okay. So any further remarks from either Scott or Michael Baker?
None from Michael Baker.
I would note that we have a special meeting of the Planning Commission, Harbor Advisory Board, and City Council on the 27th to review the Centennial Parkway and Embarcadero widening project, meaning we have plans, and I just actually got another email from RRM to show that, and I'll be preparing the staff report tomorrow for that. And so there's going to be a twofold thing. We're either going to start at 4 or 4:30. That decision hasn't been made yet, and that'll be the special meeting going till 6. And so that presentation will give the opportunity for the Planning Commission and the Harbor Advisory Board to provide input on the plan, and then we're going to represent those plans at the regular City Council meeting for the City Council, and then all those folks typically come to the council meetings because they don't typically come to the special meeting. So we're going to do it again and take input from the public that way as well as input from the council. So we're doing the presentation twice.
And I noticed the council was interested in seeing how that would integrate with the potential hotel development in that on the Libertine site.
So what they want to do is see what it looks like, so they could, we had what Chair Teft is referring to is we had a consent of landowner on the last City Council meeting for the redo of the Off the Hook lease site. We had 3 proposals in response to the RFP. 2 of them were specifically related to the Off the Hook lease site, and 1 of them included the adjacent Libertine site as well. And so, I think they had a little bit of a hard time dealing with it because it was hard to compare them. One's 2 lease sites, and then 2 are 1. So that was kind of difficult. And so they wanted to continue that process on, have staff do a cursory sort of overview of each of the projects, provide some input back to the applicants. Or the proposers, and give them opportunities to comment or change their plans if they wanted to, taking into consideration what they were going to see on the 27th, which is the revised or the Centennial Parkway plans. They're not going to be finalized by then. Those are draft plans. We're going to take the input from the PC, the HAB, and the City Council, roll that back all up and do another finalized draft, and then run that through the advisory boards likely.
But do you think that RRM will be able to integrate any of that information by the 27th?
So we are going to just have them show what it looks like as it relates to the existing development that's there. And we gave them specific direction to do that because they asked if they wanted to show the one that was recommended and requested they not do that.
Okay.
Because it wasn't, quite frankly, very well received. And to be fair, because we have 3 proposers and they're all still on the table, that would probably not be a fair evaluation. So we want them to show what's there and that in those drawings and sketches in context with what's existing. So that's all that I have. That was it.
So with that, we will adjourn to our next special scheduled GPAC meeting, which will be on September 26th at 4 p.m. I'm sorry, 29th. Broke my glasses. At the Community Center multi-purpose room.
It's going to be 4 to 7?
4 o'clock.
Or 4 to 6?